You know, there's something deeply unsettling about the moment you realize you're seeing something everyone around you is blind to. It's not a gift, it's a curse that Friedrich Nietzsche understood more intimately than perhaps any philosopher who ever lived. And once you see it, you can never go back to being like them. Have you ever been in a conversation where you suddenly understood something profound, but when you tried to explain it, people looked at you like you were speaking a different language? Maybe you've felt that gnawing sensation that everyone around you is sleepwalking through life, following scripts they didn't write, obeying rules they never questioned. If you've ever felt like you're the only one who notices the patterns, the contradictions, the lies we tell ourselves, then you already know the danger I'm about to describe. This might be the most dangerous psychological territory a human being can enter. What I'm about to share has been systematically suppressed, not by conspiracy, but by something far more insidious, our collective need for comfortable blindness. Because here's what nobody tells you. Seeing clearly isn't enlightenment, it's isolation. Understanding isn't freedom. It's a prison of consciousness that you build around yourself, bar by bar, truth by truth. And the most terrifying part? Once you start seeing, you can't stop. The veil doesn't just lift, it burns away, leaving you naked before a reality that most people will die without ever glimpsing. In 1889, Friedrich Nietzsche collapsed on a street in Turin, Italy, throwing his arms around a horse being whipped, weeping uncontrollably. Most people think this was his descent into madness. But what if I told you it was the inevitable result of seeing too much, too clearly, for too long? Nietzsche spent his entire life mapping the precise psychological dangers of individual perception, not as theory, but as lived experience. He discovered something so fundamental about human consciousness that it drove him to the edge of sanity. Those who see what others don't aren't blessed with insight, they're cursed with clarity. Let me tell you what I mean, because by the end of this, you'll never look at your own perceptions the same way. I'm going to show you 3 specific dangers Nietzsche identified, 7 warning signs you're already experiencing them, and most importantly, how to navigate this territory without losing yourself. But here's what nobody tells you. Understanding this won't make it easier. It will make it real. And reality, as Nietzsche discovered, is the heaviest burden a human being can carry. In 1869, a 24-year-old Friedrich Nietzsche was appointed professor at the University of Basel, the youngest person ever to hold such a position. He was brilliant, charismatic, destined for academic greatness, but something happened in those lecture halls that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Nietzsche began to see patterns in human behavior that others couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. He noticed how his colleagues clung to ideas not because they were true, but because they were comfortable. One day, while teaching Greek tragedy, Nietzsche had what he later called his terrible insight. Human beings don't seek truth, they seek stories that justify their suffering. You see, Nietzsche realized that everyone around him was performing in an elaborate play, reciting lines written by tradition, morality, and fear. He wrote to his friend, "I sit in my lectures and watch educated men nod along to ideas that contradict everything they claim to believe. They don't see the contradiction. They can't see it." Now, I want to be very clear about something. Nietzsche wasn't claiming superiority. He was recognizing a curse. Because once you see the performance, you can't participate anymore. You become an audience member in your own life, watching everyone else play their roles while you stand apart, unable to pretend. This realization didn't make Nietzsche feel powerful. It made him feel like he was drowning in clarity while everyone else floated on comfortable lies. This same pattern exists today, but it's infinitely more complex. We've been taught that awareness is power, that consciousness is evolution, that seeing clearly is the goal. But what if that's the most dangerous lie of all? Society operates on a kind of collective agreement to not see certain things. We agree to ignore contradictions, to accept narratives that don't match reality, to participate in systems we know are broken. Think about it. We all know social media is destroying mental health, yet we scroll. We know consumer culture is hollow, yet we buy. We see the performance, yet we perform. It's like we're all swimming in an ocean of collective delusion, and most people have developed gills. But some of us, maybe you, still have lungs, and every breath of clarity feels like drowning. But what if I told you that this isn't a modern problem? What if humans have always needed these collective illusions to function? What if seeing clearly has always been dangerous? Not just socially, but psychologically, spiritually, existentially. Nietzsche discovered that individual perception isn't just isolating, it's fundamentally destabilizing to the psyche, because human consciousness wasn't designed for truth. It was designed for survival, and sometimes survival requires blindness. The first thing Nietzsche discovered was that human perception operates on what he called necessary fictions, lies we must believe to function. But here's the disturbing part. These aren't conscious lies, they're perceptual filters installed so deeply that most people live and die without ever knowing they exist. And the moment you see past them, you don't become enlightened, you become psychologically homeless. You see, consciousness is like water finding its level. Most people's awareness naturally settles at the exact depth that allows for maximum social functioning with minimum existential terror. Think of it as a kind of psychological thermostat. Too little awareness, and you're a beast. Too much, and you're paralyzed by the weight of existence itself. Nietzsche called this the optimum illusion level, the precise amount of self-deception required for a human being to get up in the morning, go to work, form relationships, and believe it all means something. But some people, through trauma, intelligence, or simple bad luck, have broken thermostats. Their consciousness doesn't stop at the comfortable level. It keeps rising, revealing layer after layer of construction, performance, and pretense. It's like being the only person who can see the strings on marionettes. At first, you try to point them out. But when others can't see them, or worse, when they get angry at you for mentioning them, you realize the terrible truth. The strings aren't a flaw in the system. They are the system. And cutting them doesn't free the puppets, it makes them collapse. Nietzsche observed this firsthand with his colleague, Jacob Burckhardt, the renowned historian. Burckhardt was brilliant, perceptive, saw many of the same patterns Nietzsche did. But he had what Nietzsche called protective blindnesses, the ability to see just enough to be insightful, but not enough to be destroyed. Nietzsche wrote, "Burckhardt knows how to stop. He sees the abyss, but builds a bridge over it. I see the abyss and realize I am the bridge." This wasn't arrogance, it was recognition of a fundamental difference in perceptual capacity. Some people can glimpse truth and look away. Others, once they see, cannot unsee. Burckhardt went on to have a successful career, stable life, died peacefully. Nietzsche spent his final decade in mental institutions. Both saw the same truths, but only one could survive the seeing. This shows up in your life when you're in a group conversation and suddenly realize everyone is playing a social game, and you can see all the moves. If you've ever felt like you're watching human interactions from outside, analyzing the subtext, the power dynamics, the hidden motivations, while everyone else just participates, you're experiencing what Nietzsche called perspectival overflow. It's that moment when someone asks, "How are you?" And you almost laugh because you can see they don't want a real answer. You know you won't give one, and yet you both perform the ritual anyway. But here's where it gets dangerous. Once you see the performance, every interaction becomes exhausting. You're simultaneously actor, director, and critic in every scene of your life. But that's not the most profound part of Nietzsche's discovery. The real danger isn't seeing through social constructions. It's what happens when you turn that same penetrating vision inward. Because if society is a performance, and you can see through it, what does that make you? This is where Nietzsche's insight becomes truly terrifying. Now, you might be thinking, but isn't self-awareness good? Isn't knowing yourself the foundation of wisdom? This is exactly the trap Nietzsche fell into, and it nearly destroyed him. Because there's a difference between healthy self-reflection and the kind of recursive self-analysis that turns consciousness into a hall of mirrors where every reflection reveals another layer of illusion. Nietzsche discovered that our deepest insights often come from our deepest wounds, what he called the gift of illness. Think of consciousness like a vessel. Most people's vessels are solid, intact, holding their sense of self perfectly, but some vessels are cracked by trauma, by sensitivity, by simply being born with thinner walls. And here's the beautiful, terrible truth. It's through the cracks that the light enters. But it's also through the cracks that everything you thought was you begins to leak out. Moses couldn't speak fluently, yet became the voice of God. Van Gogh saw colors that drove him mad, yet painted beauty that moves us centuries later. Nietzsche saw through the foundations of Western civilization, yet couldn't maintain basic human relationships. The very damage that allows you to see what others can't also prevents you from living as others do. You become like a deep-sea fish brought to the surface, able to see the sun for the first time, but unable to survive in this new pressure. Nietzsche wrote, "I am one thing, my writings are another." He understood that his insights came from a place of fundamental disconnection from normal human experience. The gift and the curse were inseparable. Here's what happens when you start seeing too clearly. First, you notice inconsistencies in what people say versus what they do. Small things, white lies, social lubrication. Then you start seeing patterns, the same dynamics playing out over and over. Conversations become predictable, relationships feel scripted. Next comes the meta-awareness. You watch yourself watching others. You analyze your own analyses. Every thought spawns 3 more thoughts about the thought. Your inner dialogue becomes a committee meeting where everyone is talking at once and no one agrees. The simple act of deciding what to have for breakfast becomes an existential crisis because you can see every motivation, question every preference, doubt every desire. Sleep becomes difficult because consciousness won't shut off. You lie awake seeing connections, patterns, implications that branch endlessly into the dark. Social situations become exhausting theaters where you're simultaneously performing normal human while observing the performance, while analyzing the observation, while questioning the analysis. You develop what Nietzsche called the loneliness of the heights, not because you think you're above others, but because you literally cannot descend to the level of unconscious participation that makes human connection possible. The danger is that this recursive consciousness becomes a prison with no walls, because the prison is awareness itself. Nietzsche watched this happen to himself in real time. He documented his own psychological dissolution with the same clarity he brought to philosophy. He wrote, "The thought of suicide is a great consolation. By means of it one gets through many a dark night. Not because he wanted to die, but because even the idea of escape provided relief from the relentless pressure of seeing." This is what happens when consciousness becomes a feedback loop. Every exit is just another room in the labyrinth. Every solution reveals itself as another problem. Every answer generates 10 new questions. And the most insidious part? You can see it happening, understand it completely, and still be powerless to stop it. Understanding the mechanism doesn't free you from it. It just makes you conscious of your own imprisonment. There are 7 distinct stages in what Nietzsche called the descent into truth, each one representing a deeper level of perception and a corresponding danger. Most people who start this journey stop at stage 3 or 4, instinctively pulling back when they sense the psychological cost. But for those who can't stop, or won't, each stage brings both terrible clarity and increasing isolation. Understanding these stages won't prevent them, but it might help you recognize where you are in the process. Stage 1. You notice your first significant contradiction between what society preaches and what it practices. Maybe it's recognizing that follow your dreams is propaganda for economic exploitation, or that love conquers all is a story we tell to make suffering meaningful. This feels exciting, like waking up. You want to share your insight, expecting others to have the same aha moment. Recognition signs, sudden clarity about a specific issue, feeling smarter than before, eagerness to discuss your revelation, surprise when others don't see it or don't care. Example: a young Nietzsche realizing his professors were teaching Greek philosophy without understanding its radical implications, feeling both thrilled by the insight and confused by their blindness. Stage 2. The contradictions start connecting. You see that the first crack is part of a larger fracture running through everything. Individual hypocrisies reveal themselves as systemic features. Personal blindness shows itself as collective necessity. You begin to understand that people aren't stupid, they're protecting themselves from truths that would destabilize their entire worldview. Recognition signs: frustration with surface conversations, difficulty enjoying previously pleasurable activities, sense of living in a different reality than others, beginning of social withdrawal. Example: Nietzsche connecting Christianity's slave morality to political systems, economic structures, and personal relationships, seeing the same pattern everywhere he looked. Stage 3. You develop the ability to see both the performance and the reality simultaneously. Every interaction exists on multiple levels. This is where most people instinctively stop. The cognitive load of maintaining double vision is exhausting. You can still function socially, but it requires constant translation between what you see and what you can say. Recognition signs: feeling like you're wearing a mask, exhaustion after social interactions, tendency to seek solitude, growing sense of alienation even among friends. Example: Nietzsche attending academic dinners, participating in collegial debates, while simultaneously seeing through the entire enterprise of scholarship as elaborate self-justification. Stage 4. Your ability to see through things turns inward. You begin analyzing your own analysis, seeing through your own seeing. Every thought generates meta-thoughts. Every feeling spawns questions about the feeling. Consciousness becomes a snake eating its own tail. This is where the real danger begins, when perception becomes perceptive of itself infinitely. Recognition signs: paralysis in decision-making, inability to trust your own motivations, feeling like a stranger in your own life, thoughts that spiral endlessly without resolution. Example: Nietzsche questioning whether his critique of morality was itself a moral position, whether his attack on systems was creating another system, whether his pursuit of truth was just another form of the will to power he diagnosed in others. When you understand all these stages together, a terrifying picture emerges. Each level of perception doesn't replace the previous one, it adds to it. You don't stop seeing the surface when you see the depths, you see everything all the time. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote about dancing over abysses. It's not that you transcend the danger, you learn to function while fully aware of it. The stages aren't a ladder you climb toward enlightenment, they're layers of an onion where each peel reveals not a core, but another layer, infinitely. This is the ultimate danger of seeing what others don't. There's no final truth waiting at the end, no solid ground to stand on. There's only deeper sight and the increasing isolation it brings. Nietzsche's collapse in Turin wasn't weakness. It was the inevitable result of seeing too much for too long with no way to unsee. This isn't just about individual psychology, it's about the fundamental structure of human civilization. Nietzsche realized that society requires a critical mass of people who can't see clearly. The entire system depends on what he called the herd instinct, the tendency to find comfort in collective blindness. Think about it. Every institution, from marriage to democracy to capitalism, requires participants to believe in fictions. Money is valuable because we agree it is. Laws have power because we pretend they do. Love is eternal because we need it to be. These aren't flaws in the system, they're features. The moment too many people see through the collective fictions, the entire structure collapses. We're living through this right now. The internet has accelerated perception, allowed more people to see the strings, the contradictions, the performances, and what's happening? Increasing polarization, mental health crises, social breakdown. Not because we're becoming worse people, but because we're seeing too much, too fast, without the psychological infrastructure to handle it. Nietzsche predicted this over a century ago. God is dead wasn't celebration, it was warning. When the collective stories die, what remains is naked reality. And most humans aren't equipped for naked reality. People will resist this truth because accepting it means accepting their own participation in necessary delusions. The anger you encounter when pointing out contradictions isn't stupidity, it's self-preservation. People intuitively understand that seeing too clearly threatens their ability to function. It's not easy to see why your parent clings to beliefs you've outgrown, why your friend repeats patterns they claim to hate, why society perpetuates systems everyone knows are broken. But once you understand that blindness is a feature, not a bug, compassion becomes possible. They're not weak. They're doing what humans have always done to survive, choosing functionality over truth. Nietzsche wrote, "The strength of a person's spirit would then be measured by how much truth he could tolerate. Most people have exactly as much truth as they can handle. Pushing them to see more isn't enlightenment, it's cruelty. This creates a terrible bind for those who see clearly. Do you share what you see and risk destroying someone's functional worldview? Or do you remain silent and accept the isolation of unshared perception?" When one person awakens to these deeper levels of perception, it creates ripples that extend far beyond the individual. You become a kind of psychological virus. Your mere presence reminds others that their consensus reality is optional. This makes you simultaneously fascinating and terrifying to be around. Some will be drawn to you, sensing you see something they're on the edge of seeing. Others will instinctively avoid you, recognizing you as a threat to their psychological stability. Relationships become complex negotiations between levels of perception. You find yourself calibrating constantly. How much truth can this person handle? How much performance can I tolerate? The ripple effect extends to every area of life. Career becomes problematic when you see through professional hierarchies. Romance becomes difficult when you see through the cultural programming of attraction. Friendship becomes strained when you can't participate in collective illusions. But here's the profound part. Sometimes, your perception gives others permission to see. Not everyone, not often, but occasionally someone is ready to remove their own blindfold, and your example shows them it's possible to survive the seeing. This is how consciousness evolves, not through mass awakening, but through individual courage that inspires individual courage, one terrifying glimpse at a time. So how do you work with this knowledge without being destroyed by it? Nietzsche left us clues, not a system, but a philosophy of navigation. Here are 7 principles for those who can't stop seeing. Step 1. Accept the burden. Stop trying to unsee or hoping it will get easier. As Nietzsche discovered, clarity is a one-way door. Fighting it only adds suffering to sight. Instead, treat your perception like any other unchangeable condition. You wouldn't blame yourself for being tall or having brown eyes. Don't blame yourself for seeing clearly. Step 2. Create. Don't just critique. Nietzsche didn't just deconstruct. He composed music, wrote poetry, created new philosophies. Channel your perception into generative work. Seeing through things is only half the equation. The other half is building new possibilities from what remains after the illusions fall away. Step 3. Find your rhythm. Develop cycles of engagement and withdrawal. Even Nietzsche took breaks in the mountains, seeking solitude to metabolize his insights. You can't live at maximum perception constantly. Learn when to see deeply and when to rest in surface appearances. Step 4. Selective sharing. Not everyone needs your level of truth. As Nietzsche learned, indiscriminate truth-telling is violence disguised as honesty. Develop discrimination about when to share insights and when silence is the greater wisdom. Step 5. Physical grounding. Nietzsche walked for hours daily. Physical movement grounds psychological insight. The body anchors what the mind would scatter. Step 6. Embrace paradox. Hold multiple truths simultaneously. As Nietzsche said, there are no facts, only interpretations. Your clear sight is also just another perspective. You stand at a crossroads that every deep seer eventually faces. Either you try to return to unconscious participation, using distraction, medication, or sheer will to dull your perception. Some succeed at this, trading depth for functionality. There's no shame in this choice. Or you accept what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate. You embrace your nature as one who sees, accepting both the gifts and curses it brings. As Nietzsche discovered, this isn't a choice you make once. It's a choice you make every morning when consciousness floods back and you remember what you see. He chose to keep looking until it broke him, but his breaking gave us maps of territories most humans will never enter. His sacrifice wasn't meaningless. It was generative. You don't have to follow his path to its end. You can learn from his journey without repeating his destination. The key is understanding that seeing clearly isn't a problem to be solved, it's a reality to be navigated. When you integrate this understanding, something profound shifts. You stop trying to fit into consensus reality and start building your own frameworks, not from arrogance, but from necessity. Your relationships change. You attract others who've glimpsed what you see, forming bonds based on shared perception rather than shared illusion. Your creativity explodes because you're no longer bound by conventional categories. Like Nietzsche, you become capable of generating entirely new ways of understanding. The exhaustion of double vision transforms into what Nietzsche called the great health, a vitality that comes from fully accepting your nature. You develop what he termed the gay science, the ability to dance with terrible truths, to find joy in the very clarity that once crushed you. This isn't about becoming happy in the conventional sense. It's about becoming authentic to your nature as one who sees. And authenticity, even painful authenticity, carries its own profound satisfaction. The danger remains. The isolation persists. But you're no longer fighting your nature. You're expressing it. And in that expression lies whatever meaning is possible for those who see too much. Remember when I told you about Nietzsche's collapse in Turin, weeping over a beaten horse? Here's what I didn't tell you. In that moment, Nietzsche wasn't just seeing animal suffering. He was seeing through the entire edifice of human civilization that allows cruelty to exist while maintaining moral pretensions. The horse was a mirror showing humanity its true face, and Nietzsche, after a lifetime of seeing through everything, finally saw through himself. His last coherent words before the decade of silence: "I am not a man, I am dynamite." He knew his insights would explode the comfortable assumptions of centuries. He saw his own role in the destruction of illusions he simultaneously depended on for sanity. That horse in Turin represented every being that suffers while others look away, and Nietzsche could no longer look away from his looking away. The recursive loop finally closed, trapping him inside his own perception. But here's the beautiful part. His breakdown wasn't failure. It was the logical conclusion of radical honesty. He followed sight to its ultimate destination and showed us the map. You are not the same person who started watching this video. Whether you realize it or not, I've installed perspectives that will continue unpacking themselves in your consciousness for days, weeks, maybe years. You've been initiated into what Nietzsche called the brotherhood of those who bear the mark of solitude. Not because I convinced you of anything, but because I showed you what you already suspected, that your ability to see deeply isn't a malfunction, it's a feature. You now carry the knowledge that others share this burden, have mapped this territory, have found ways to dance where others would collapse. This doesn't make the journey easier, but it makes it less lonely. You're part of a lineage of seers stretching back through history, those who couldn't help but look even when looking hurt. The question isn't whether you'll use this knowledge. You will. The question is how consciously you'll navigate what you now see. Will you rage against the blindness of others? Will you retreat into isolation? Will you try to force your sight on those who need their illusions? Or will you find that narrow path Nietzsche walked, between truth and compassion, between clarity and connection, between seeing and being? I leave you with his words. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Your clear sight is your chaos. What star will you birth from it? The danger of seeing what others don't is real, but so is the possibility of creating what others can't. What will you do with your terrible gift?